and welcome. In higher education, you need to be able to write critically, as well as given the facts. You need to be able to make use of these facts to come to conclusions. These conclusions need to be justified and supported by evidence. You also need to be aware of other points of view that exist in relation to what you are discussing. Therefore, in academic writing, it is often necessary to make it clear to your reader what opinion you hold or what your position is with regard to a certain issue. This is often called your stance, or your voice, or your position, or your claim. Is any other person have problems with the sound? Just let me know. Okay, it may be based on other people's research, but the conclusion you have come to is your own. So, as a student, it's not enough to simply describe a situation or recall the facts. You have to take a stance or position yourself in relation to the situation or the facts. Of course, you need to know and reproduce the information, but you also need to use the information to give an answer or explanation to the issue, to give your view. That's what this webinar is about. Let me write to Ratchet something. Okay, that's for you. This quote of Harry Potter's author points out the power and importance of words and reminds you how necessary is that you know concepts and techniques about how to make them express your ideas precisely and convincingly in order to convince readers. Believe me, she knows what she's talking about, since she captivates us, even adults, with her story of wizards. This is the agenda for this webinar. As usual, I will present the concepts, then what is behind them, and finally some suggestions to help you get the goal of expressing your stance in academic text. Good, Reggie. Good to have you back. Whenever you write, you have a certain stance, an attitude toward your topic. The way you express that stance, which is your tone, affects the way you come across as a writer and as a person. Tone is created through the words you use and the way you approach your subject and audience. Let's go deeper into this topic. Adrian says, my advisor calls the process of synthesizing scholarly literature for self-expression and original, theoretical, and or empirical insight language mining. Oh, that's great. That's great. Oh, we have more people today. Welcome, Raisa, Lalil, Sheng, Christopher, Jessica. Writers need to start a dialogue with the reader to produce more engaging and persuasive text, and that implies to make their position clear. You can show your position with respect to a particular issue by showing how confident or not you are with regard to your position, being explicit about the relationships you are discussing, or indicating the strength of your claim. We are going to talk about that in some minutes. Now let's see. These two definitions of stance are focused on its attitudinal essence. You are required to express your position or point of view through arguments solid enough to be analyzed, evaluated, and even challenged. We may also infer from them that writers have to know how to perform such tasks effectively, how to establish a convincing conversation with their readers. Now, the traditional view of academic writing as providing facts in a direct and impersonal manner and eventually leading to an unavoidable truth has been questioned and challenged. This has led to a fundamental change which has resulted in viewing academic text as a persuasive attempt to create, between writers and readers, an act of identity, conveying not only disciplinary content, but also representation of the writer. In other words, a process that is in fact interactive. The two examples presented in this slide illustrate such an interaction, since the writer's choices of words make readers perceive their position. If you check the words in red, you can realize two different stances. The first text suggests the writer believed the studies result in a less convinced way than they do in the second text. Indicated versus proved, may versus will, some versus most. So you have the same words mainly, however, the choice of those words in red makes you as a reader to perceive that in the first paragraph, the author or the writer is not so convinced of the impact of the results of the studies, while in the second one, the choice of proved, will, most makes you as a reader perceive it in a different way. The writer made choices to transmit their message, but readers have to interact with those choices to establish the degree of certainty that the writer has about the truthfulness of the message. Now, when somebody asks you, what's your stance? That person is asking you to state clearly what you think about, usually, a point of controversy. This is not the same as arguing enthusiastically from one side or another. What's your stance requires you to discuss the extent to which you side with one argument or another and provide evidence that supports your opinion. You might be mostly pro or mostly con, or somewhere in between, or pro in some context and con in another. In other words, they are asking you to consider carefully what are your thoughts and opinions on a subject and why you think this way, providing appropriate academic evidence. In the slide, there are three different ways of showing the writer's stance, the ones that I mentioned before. By showing confidence through the highlighted opposite words, like in the first one, it's not the same to say it was clearly or to say it was perhaps proposed. You see? It's two different stances, and they are expressed by the words, the highlighted words. By making relationships explicit using signal words like for example and so in the second example, the second paragraph. And by making the strength of the claim evident using verbs that express different levels of certainty, like in the last one, in the last paragraph, in which in the first sentence, it says suggest. In the second one, It says shows. Both verbs express different degrees of certainty. So, stance being an attitude needs to be made explicit. And that is done, among other things, by the tone of the text. So here you have the definition of tone. The words selected by the writer communicate their stance in a positive, neutral, or negative way, as you will see later on. And that selection affects the way not only the message, but also the writer is perceived by readers. Therefore, you need to make that choice in a conscious and supported way so as to assure your message is comprehended as you intend. So the tone of your message, in other words, the words that you choose in order to communicate your ideas, can make your message more clearer or not. Okay, that depends on how you choose that. And we are going to see examples of this, so don't worry. So, in academic writing, you need to be aware of the relationship between your stance and the tone of your text, and to assure that the chosen tone is the best one to achieve your communication goal. Check the two examples presented and reflect upon which tone is the most appropriate to convey the writer's stance in an academic context. Take into account the characteristics of academic writing, right? If you read them, you will see how the choice of words affected the impact of this text in an academic setting. Okay, so it's time to discuss the elements that are involved both in stance and tone as tools to express your ideas properly and effectively. Thank you, Adrian. Adrian says the examples on these slides are wicked cool. Okay. Let's begin restating the idea of academic writing as an interaction between writers and readers. Such interaction is based upon both stance and engagement. In other words, opposition and participation. Position and participation and synonyms of stance and engagement. Stance is created by means of, let's look at the left side of the slide. Hedges, which are words or phrases used to allow for additional possibilities or to avoid commitment. I'm going to present examples of all of this. Right now is just a time to understand what those elements are, because when you understand what they are, it would be easy for you to understand examples. Boosters, that are words which express certainty in what writers say and to mark involvement with the topic and solidarity with the audience. Attitude markers, which show the writer's affective rather than epistemic or knowledgeable attitude to proposition. And this is very special because it's not the same to express your knowledgeable, which is also called epistemic attitude to what is said. But sometimes you have to express your feelings, your affective reaction to that situation or proposition. Self-mention, that refers to the use of possessive adjective and person pronouns to present propositional, affective, and interpersonal information in the text. Now, let's look at the right side of the slide. Engagement or participation is used to communicate writer and readers in the discussion of ideas within the text. Reader pronouns are used to acknowledge the reader's presence. When you say you or he and so on. Directives are used to instruct the reader to perform an action or to see things as determined by the writer. Is when you want to convince someone and you use some expression to lead them into the track that you want them to follow. And sometimes they do that. Questions offer dialogical involvement, invite engagement, and lead the readers to the writer's viewpoint. Appeals to shared knowledge refer to the presence of explicit markers where readers are asked to recognize something as familiar or accepted. It goes to is to take the readers to the background of what you are discussing. And personal size help the writers address readers directly by interrupting the argument to offer a comment on what has been said. Let's see examples of a stance resources so as to have a clearer idea of that. And here you have. Check the example so as to have a better view of what I'm trying to tell you today. So in that sense, when you say, for instance, possible, might, perhaps, you are opening the possibility that there are other things that you are not talking about, but when you say possible, might, and perhaps, you are leaving the door open to those options. And when you say clearly, demonstrate, beyond doubt, you are saying what is your involvement in relation to that. When you say clearly, you believe in what you are saying. Okay. When you say doubt, you are not so sure about that. When you say agree, hopefully, remarkable, then you are expressing your attitude to what is being said. And when you say I, my, our, mine, your, and those all, you are using, trying to include people in that discussion that you're doing. And here you have examples of engagement resources. When you say you, your, inclusive we, you are trying to help your readers to feel that they are part of what you are doing. When you say something like that, personal asides, look, the writer is discussing something, and then that person stop that discussion and make a comment in order to catch the idea, or to catch the interest of the reader. And as I believe many TESOL professionals with readerly knowledge, that's a comment to attract the reader, okay? Appeals to share knowledge is to go back to the background and try to use that to make the whole process of comprehension easier. This measurement is distinctly different from the more familiar, and so on. And when you say consider, note, imagine, you are trying to lead your readers to the way in which you want them to go. And when you use questions, you are trying to do a kind of dialogue, to be dialectical discussion. What do these two have in common? What might ask? And that is a question that is directed to your reader. Okay. Now, let's talk about the elements that convey tone. We already said that the tone is the way that the writer chooses in order to express their stance. Now, these elements are persona, diction, syntax, and level of formality. Persona is the complex personality implicit in the text, and the relationship between tone and persona is expressed through writer's attitude towards subject, reader, and self. It has many variations. For example, writers may be angry about a subject or amused by it, or discussing it dispassionately. They may treat readers as intellectual inferiors to be lectured or as friends with whom they are talking. Okay? Diction, or the words that the writer chooses, is the main factor in tone. For one kind of writing, an author may choose one type of vocabulary, even slang, and for another, of course, not in academic writing. And for another, the same writer may choose an entirely different set of words. Syntax refers to the order in words, the order of words in phrases and sentences. The syntax a writer chooses to express their ideas contributes to set up the tone of the text. Okay? And level of formality is an important factor when setting the tone of academic text, considering that academic writing is characterized by formality. And now we are here where you want to be, because so far you may think, oh, that's too theoretical, or it's too linguistic for me, that I'm from the science field of a study, or the psychological field of a study, or something like that. But after presenting what factors should be considered to set up your stance and the tone of your academic text, some guidelines are going to be suggested to help you improve your ability to perform those tasks effectively. Therefore, we are beginning to that part that you really like, the part of, how can I do that? Let's see. Let's begin by talking about establishing the focus of your writing and therefore being ready to set up your stance. Professors will ask you to write in third person only and will want you to avoid first or second person. One important reason for such request is that third person point of view focuses on a person or topic outside yourself or the reader, making it the most professional, academic, and objective way to write. The goal of third-person point of view is to remove personal subjective bias from your writing, at least in theory. Most of the writing you do require you to focus on ideas, people, and issues outside yourself, so third person will be the most appropriate. The point of view also helps your readers stay focused on the topic instead of thinking about you or themselves. The point of view you choose to write in will depend on your audience and purpose. If your goal is to relate to your audience in a personal way about a topic that you have experience with, then it may be appropriate to use first-person point of view to share your experience and connect with your audience. The least commonly used point of view is second person, especially in academic writing, because most of the time you will not know your audience well enough to write directly to them. In the next 4 slides, I will present you questions you can use to stay your stance and tone. So here you have the guidelines to identify your stance before you are beginning to write. The first set of questions refer to the purpose of your writing. All writing has a purpose. We write to explore our thoughts, express ourselves, and entertain. to record words and events, to communicate with others, to persuade others to think or behave at certain ways, especially in academic writing. In fact, we often have several purposes at the same time. For example, while we try to persuade an audience of something, we may also entertain the audience and explore our own thoughts on the subject. Therefore, you have to identify your purpose before writing. While writing often has many purposes, you usually focus on one. Before you start to write, ask yourself what the primary purpose of the writing task is: to entertain, to inform, to persuade, to demonstrate your knowledge. How do your audience's expectation affect your purpose? Okay, so these three questions also can help you to do that. Now, what you write, how you write, how you phrase it, even your choice of genre, memo, essay, email, note, speech, all are influenced by the audience you visualize. And your audience will interpret your writing according to their expectation and experiences. Whatever the rhetorical situation your writing must meet the expectation of your audience. Consequently, identify your audience before writing. Audiences may be defined as none, multiple, or unknown. Non-audiences include people with whom you are familiar, as well as people you don't know personally, but whose needs and expectations you do know. That's something very common in academic writing. Ratchet says that the stance or tone needs to be consistent throughout the text, or can we switch in between? Yes, you can switch in between depending on what specific point you are discussing, because you can be, for instance, pro something, and then in a different part of your work, you can be against another thing. Okay, so that is related to the first one. So in some way, you can be pro one part of something and against another part of that same something. So, my pleasure, Rich. You often have to write for multiple audiences. In these instances, the initial recipient may pass text along to others. And unknown audiences are difficult to address, and you can't be sure what they know, what they need to know, how they react. These are some of the questions you can ask yourself in relation to your audience. And this element is very important for you, because your text has to address the expectations of your audience. For instance, let me give you my own example. When I'm preparing the webinars, I have to take into account my audience. And I know that you are from different fields of studies, therefore I cannot work only in one field of a study. I have to present ideas with a more open view, so all of you can relate to what I'm saying, you see? So that's important. Now, sorry if I pronounce the next word not too good, because I don't know why it's difficult for me to say genres. Are kinds of writing that have particular conventions. Letters, profiles, reports, position papers, poems, web pages, instruction, even jokes are genres. They help you write by establishing features for conveying certain kinds of information, and also give readers clue about what sort of information they're likely to find. So you have to identify your genre. Does your writing situation call for a certain kind of it? Academic assignments generally specify the genre, but if it isn't clear, please ask your instructor. That's very important, because the kind of writing that you are expected to write, the kind of text that you are expected to write is important for you to be successful, because in academic writing, there are some specific ways of writing things, and you have to be sure which one is being asked in your case. And finally, in this part, okay, let's talk about stance specifically. Whenever you write, you have a certain attitude toward a topic. The way you express that stance, which is your tone, affects the way you come across as a writer and a person. Because if you choose the wrong tone to express your idea, you may be perceived as a weak person, or also by a wicked person, a bad person, okay, or a person that is just trying to make funny things when you are not doing that, or when you're not intended to do that. So that's why you have to identify your stance. What is your attitude about your topic? Objective, critical, curious, opinionated, passionate, indifferent? Your stance may be affected by your relationship to your audience, your genre, and by your purpose. Tone is created through the words you use and the way you approach your subject and an audience. Just as you likely alter what you say depending on whether you're speaking to a boss, an instructor, a parent, or a good friend, so you need to make similar adjustment as a writer. Okay. Now, let's see. This table presents some type of stance, their definition, and some examples to guide you know how to express stances. Okay. For instance, let's take one, the second one, certainty. When you look at the example, without a doubt, that part of the sentence makes clear what your stance is. Or when you are trying to present just the point that you are discussing, just using source of knowledge, and you say, according to the news, okay, that is not my stand, is the stance of the news, okay? You can be rude or you can be tactful. Please do give my love to him. That's a way of being tactful, okay? Now, these next two slides show stance markers, words and phrases that you can use to express stances. This first one gives you ideas of how to express your stance using adjective plus the clauses that begins with that. Okay. For instance, it is apparent that, it is certain that, it is acceptable that, okay? And you have also stance adjective plus to, and stance nouns plus that clauses, or stance nouns plus to complement clauses. And in this example, in this table, you have markers in terms of hedges, boosters, counters, and reformulation markers. And what is the examples of them? And then what is the fact from the rhetorical point of view? Okay. For instance, when you say certainly that this is in this way, you are closing the dialogical space. You say, it is in this way, not other way. Forget about it. No alternative. Okay? And if you wonder how to choose a stance, this slide can help you do that. Okay? Here you have 4 steps that you can follow in order to choose a stance for your academic paper. First, you list at least 3 pros and 3 cons. You evaluate which stance is the strongest one for what is your purpose, okay, when writing. And you evaluate which stance you can argue with most effectively, because it's not only to select the strongest stance, but it's also to put it in harmony with your ability to defend it. Okay, you can have a very, very good stance, but if you are not able to defend it, that stance will not considered valid or acceptable. So here you have also an interaction like the one that we talked before, an interaction between writers and readers. And in this case, is an interaction between the character of something and your ability to perform with that thing. And finally, choose the one you can provide the most solid and illustrative evidence. So there is a very famous physics rule that says that the best explanation of something is the most direct one. So in this case, it's more or less that too. If you can defend things in a direct way, in a valid way, no problem. Don't complicate your life too much. Professors are going to help you complicate it. And now, the next, this one may help you know how to express your stance. Here you have introductory verbs, thinking verbs, reporting verbs, evaluated adjective, evaluated adverbs, modal adjective, modal nouns, signal words. And those examples will help you understand and then choose your own words. And I built this table in order to help people that are not from the social sciences or are not from the linguistic field of study to understand what I am telling you. Now, the next 3 slides presents way to express tones. So if you want to express positive tones, you can go from left to right and being more positive while you are moving from left to right. So you can be reactive and then positive and quiet, and the positive thought and the positive and caring, and at the end positive and lively. You are ecstatic, or you are energetic or enthusiastic or happy, you see? Sorry if I get too happy. Okay, this presents way of expressing neutral tones. So when you use these words and these expressions, you are being neutral. Okay? And this shows negative tones in the same way. From left to right is increasing the negative aspect of it. Because you can be sardonic, or you can be manipulative, or you can be quarrelsome. And then you finish in the hospital because of that stance, that attitude. So, in the main ideas section of this webinar, I want to emphasize how important is that you master the expression of your stance and the use of an appropriate tone so as to improve your academic writing. I suggest you reflect upon the ideas presented today and practice as much as you can. Okay, for instance, if you want to express one of these negative tones, you choose the tones that you want to express. You are suspicious, for instance, and then you look for words that express that you are suspicious. See? And you practice, and you practice. And finally, sorry, here you have the references that I used today. And this is a suggestion that we at Doctoral.net make so you can take advantage of tools to improve your learning. So thanks for registering, and I hope you find this webinar useful. Okay? Please feel free to ask, to comment, to express your ideas, do whatever you want. I hope not to insult me, but if you want, if you have to, because I have not done a very good job, okay, you can do that. Oh, sorry, welcome, Morgan, Mahabit for second time, Janglo Zipora, Olivia for second time, Christy, and Latonia. Any question, any idea, any comment? You like it, Richard? How useful do you think that this could be for you? I mean, for all of you. I know that it could be perceived just now as too theoretical, right? But when you download the presentation, you receive the recording and you read it again, you will see that it has been presented in a way that you can use it any day. Ian says, what is your opinion on using I in academic writing? For example, when explaining the personal background of the researcher, which led to their interest in the topic. Yeah. In my opinion, there are certain parts of your dissertation in which you have to express or use first person pronoun. And it's because, as you said, in the part that you have to explain why you decided to study certain that topic or something like that. However, my advice is that you follow the guidelines of your university and of your instructor. Some universities ask for a section in their dissertation in which you have to discuss how you got to that topic and how you handled it. But if that section is not included, it is better to use only the third person pronouns. Ratchet says, I wasn't aware of the idea of tones and stands, so it was a great introduction. Hope to use this concept to guide my writing in future. Good, that's true. And you know, my pleasure here. And you know that some people think that diction, which is something that we mentioned here, and which is the main aspect and the main factor to set up the tone, and tone even are for oral things. But no, they have to be used in writing too. And when you read something, you can perceive as a reader what is the position or the stance of the writer, but also in what way, with what tone that person did it. For instance, if he was defenseless, for instance, or if it was judgmental, or if it was just informative or if it was just confident. Okay. My pleasure, Christy. Hope you use this. And my next webinars, the next 3 till the end of the year, are going to be devoted to talk about types of argumentation. First, the classical argumentation or Aristotelian one, then the dialectic or argumentation, and finally the evaluative argumentation. Those will be the next 3 and final webinars in this year. Next year, I'm going to conduct just 1 webinar per month. And I'm trying to, I'm created together with Dr. Elena, we are creating a good set to offer you, a good set especially focus on how to develop your research, how to build it, and how to express it in written form. Okay. Any other question? I'm going to stop the recording and telling people that I really appreciate that you have registered for this webinar.